Greetings, students. I'm Dr. Sadri, your professor for this course, Politics of the Middle East. And what we are going to do today is we're going to talk about Module 6. And as you know, Module 6 is focusing on the notion of leaders and change. All right, from a perspective of political scientists, leaders, and leadership plays a very important role in any political system. It doesn't matter if it's an authoritarian system or what some people have been traditionally called dictatorship, or even if it's a democracy. So leaders, they play a significant role. Of course, in a democracy, people, they do have a lot more, power because they can vote in and out particular leaders that they like. And in an authoritarian system, depending on even if it's called itself a republic or if it's a monarchy, people, they do not have usually that much right as individuals who live or are a citizen of a true democracy. However, do not underestimate the power of people, because people could still demonstrate. Is that right? And they can cause some other, or for example, they can contribute to the segment of the population or liberation movements or terrorist groups or whatever it's fighting against the leadership. So, what are we going to do with the leaders here? In this particular, reading that you had in Module 6 and the articles that I put over there, we all have focused on 3 leaders from 3 major countries in the region. We have focused, one of the cases is that, focusing on Mustafa, Kemal Atatürk, is that right? The leader of what became Republic of Turkey. Then we have a case of Muhammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, the last king of the Pahlavi dynasty in Iran, just before revolution. And last but certainly not least, we have, General Kemal Abdel Nasser of Egypt as the, very prominent leader of Egypt during the time. Okay. Now, before we get into that one, I just want to kind of remind you that notice that we have what? A very basic, because this is case study related, so it's a little bit different from the type of, usually PowerPoints that we have, which is a 5-point scale, introduction, conclusion, and then 3 points in between. This one is more oriented toward, description of the leadership and everything. So it starts with an introduction, okay, which is I already mentioned that to you. And then after that, it moves on to talking a little bit about the traditional Middle Eastern leaders, which I'm going to talk about. Then it goes to each one of our case studies, Atatürk, and then what is known in the West as the Shah, is that right? And then what? President Nasser, and then we conclude. Okay, having said that one, let's start with what? Let's start with the introduction. And in that regard, what I like to do is I like to advance it, okay? So, what's so significant about leaders and leadership? As I mentioned, in any political unit, the leader of that unit is very significant. Why? Because the leader can make changes, can bring changes, and also the leader could prevent change. So I want you to keep an open mind, because usually people, they think, oh yeah, leaders, they bring some change. Sometimes leaders are there not to bring a change. Okay? I'm going to give you an example when we cover the next one, Roman numeral. So you would not be surprised, all right? Then, one of the other things about this, lecture that you need to probably pay attention to is the whole idea of a case study. So we had those 3 leaders that we talked about. We're going to talk about them in details. Atatürk, remember, the Shah of Iran, and last but not least, President Nasser. Is that right? Each one of those is considered a case study. And there is a very much of a value associated with case studies, because in a case study, you focus only on that either individual or a country or an institution or something. So that means you learn a lot about it. And then you become like a mini expert on that. Sometimes people, they get their PhDs and they write their thesis and write books about one particular thing. They become really what? A major expert in that area. All right. So having said that one, so we know the value of it. So it's not just like, oh, we talk about it like anything else. Because if you remember, in Module 1, 2, and 3, we talked about a lot of issues in general. Is that right? Okay, so now we are talking more specifically. Now, having said that one, what I wanted to do is I want to go to Roman numeral 2. and mention some of the traditional leaders of the what of the Middle East, because each one of them sometimes they go against the stereotypes that we have. Okay, we have a stereotype in the West that we think, oh, education brings, really open-mindedness to everybody, and that result in creating a society by a leader who has the wisdom to open it up, bring modernization, bring economic development, bring hopefully political development. That is not always the case, okay? That's not always the case. Why? Here we go, the very first example. Let me tell you a little bit about this person. Sultan Said ibn Taimur. This is the, basically the king of Oman from 1932 to 1970. So, what was so special about this individual? This individual, was sent by his parents to the best schools that the British had to offer. Now, remember, this is in Oman, is that right? And you know where Oman is, okay? So, Oman is right there. So, where would be the best schools that he could go? From here, and this, of course, Iran. Remember, this area that they called Pakistan, is that right? There was no Pakistan by that time. Is that right? In, early 1930s. Is that right? It was all what, Indian subcontinent. So they sent him to the British schools in the closest place to them, which was in what? In India. All right. So what do we expect from somebody like that? Oh my gosh. The guy got some of the best education at the time. So he's going to come up with these new ideas and everything. Oh my God. When he becomes a king, is that right? Takes the place of his father. He does exactly opposite to what we would think. He did not want. He thought providing education to his, people, which he never called citizen, he called his subject, is that right? Is going to cause a lot of problem. Therefore, he didn't really open up many schools, not very many hospitals. He wouldn't even allow very many cars. If you were so rich that you have managed to bring a car for yourself and your family to the country, there was no Department of Motor Vehicles, all right? You had to write to the king, and he had to issue a permit. Can you imagine the leader of a country doing something like that? So he kept his people, as, conform and restricted as possible, because he was afraid that, and he knew that educated people have a tendency to ask tough questions. And one of the toughest questions they usually ask is, why? You did this, why? You did that, why? He didn't want it to be questioned. So he continued doing that one all the way to 1970, when his son, Sultan Qaboos, that he sent his son to UK, again, British education, this and that. He was hoping that his son to become like him. Well, when his son graduated and came back in, late 60s, and, he started giving some suggestion to his father that, hey, maybe dad, we should do this, maybe we should do that for our country. People are getting ahead of us, we're a country that we have some potential. He put his own son in house arrest, okay? So then the member of the court, they started getting around, with Prince Qaboos. Well, he wasn't a king at that time. He was Prince Qaboos. And they said, you know what? Your dad is a nice guy, but let's face it, the country needs to grow. And he's not going to be the type of leader who's going to bring us to, 20th century and that time. So they did what they call a house coup, okay? Basically a court coup. Very, very gently, the guards and everything, when the king ordered them to do something, they refused, and they escorted very politely the king to where he had put his own son in house arrest. Is that right? In one section and a couple of rooms of basically the palace. And they asked the prince, Qaboos, to come and take the charge, and Prince Qaboos overnight became what? Became, Sultan Qaboos. And Sultan Qaboos started bringing a lot of changes to Oman. So, what I'm trying to tell you is that don't take things for granted, okay? Just do not make some assumption and say, oh, okay, this has always worked, because this is what worked in Western Europe, and this is how it worked in North America. But whatever worked in what we call Western development model, it doesn't mean necessarily it's going to happen the same way in other parts of the world. So that was one example. Now, the other example I want to give you is another surprising example. Here we go. This is King Abdul Aziz ibn Saud, is that right? Who, basically lived from 1880 to 1953. And what he did was against the expectation. I'm not suggesting he was the most democratic person and he brought democracy to Saudi, what we call Saudi Arabia. Is that right? No. But he was a tribal man. He could not even read and write. Is that right? He used to basically use his, ring as a, to mark things like his signature. Is that right? But he had wisdom in terms of, okay, I want to, my country with this oil that Americans have found, and we established this company called Aramco. Is that right? We use that money to develop my country. Here we go. This is a person with no education, as traditional as you can imagine. His claim to fame was, as a head of the tribe, he was a very good soldier. Okay? He basically united all of the tribes all around the area we call nowadays Saudi Arabia. It was actually the Arabian Peninsula. He organized them together, cities from, Hijaz and, Riyadh and Medina and Mecca and all those cities, they became basically united under the same flag, established a country. You can see that, we call that country not Arabia, we call it Saudi Arabia, which is basically named after the, his tribes. Okay, so you see what I'm talking about? Again, we're talking about two cases that completely went against the stereotype we usually expect. All right, having said that one, now let's move on to our case studies. Okay, if I can advance it. So, the very first case study, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. Well, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk was actually coming from a middle-class family, is that right? In what nowadays we call Turkey, but it was actually an Ottoman Empire, because Turkey was a very small part of Ottoman Empire, just like Iran is a small part of what Persian Empire. Okay, so what he did was, as I mentioned, he was from a middle-class family, very normal, nothing. Oh yeah, we are the 1% of the population. No, what he did was, because he was from a very average class, he got his education like many other people by going to the military. So public schools, and then he went to military. And the military is a very good instrument of social mobility in countries like that. Okay, so he got that one. He started becoming involved more in politics when he started seeing that a lot of the decision made by the Ottoman sultans, is that right, or the kings or emperor, that's not necessarily the best one. So as he was developing, his upbringing and education became public schools and what? Military education. And in the military, they teach you things. Like, for example, you can become an engineer, you can become a doctor, you can become this, you can become that. Because they have funds that if you show the right, interest and you have the right, natural given talent or something, you can be all you can be. Is that right? Here we go. So his profession developed. He wanted to be a soldier. He was a very good soldier, and as a part of the the military of the Ottoman, he was actually able to distinguish himself quite a bit. All right, and he continued with his career until what happened was, after World War I, basically the Allies, they were basically dividing, the Ottoman Empire, which lost was on the losing side with Germany and some other countries. So, and then all throughout the Ottoman Empire, some of the, local people, they've started rebelling against the system. There was rebellion in Greece. Greece was a part of Ottoman Empire, became independent. Albania, many of the, former Yugoslavian, republics right now, they were part of it. Macedonia, you name it, In fact, actually, part of the Ottoman Empire, if you can look at right there, is that right? So it says Turkey, is that right? Part of it was Iraq, part of it was some of the Arab, states right here, Syria, this, that, including what? Palestine and Judea, Samaria, and all those areas, even a part of what? Egypt. So as you can see, very, very large empires, all right? And he started dividing. So he thought, okay, if you're dividing all these areas and are giving it to all these different nationalities and everything, there should be a homeland for the nationality we call the Turks. The Turks, is that right? So, and these are, of course, the Turks that, the name Turkey comes from, is that right? Were actually people that they used to be nomadic people living like north of China, and then as the Chinese empire started growing, started pushing these nomadic people, is that right? That they had horses, they had, goats and, what do you call it, sheep and everything. They started pushing it more and more and more to the west. Now, some of these groups were the one that they became famous in the history of the West, like Genghis Khan, is that right? and the others. But the rest of them, they kind of settled. Some of them, they became, when the Muslim empire expanded, they became Muslim, and then they became very good servants of the Islamic empire. And then in this area, they kind of established themselves, and the Ottoman empire came about as a result of individuals in that group that they worked very hard and they established their rule right here. So Ottomans have a very distinguished history. Therefore, Ataturk was very proud of it, okay? But then he saw if everybody else is going to go away, Armenians, the Greeks, Albanians, Bosnians, and all, of course, then the Arab countries, is that right, which became Arab countries because they didn't exist in that format. A part of Iraq was in Iran, part of Iraq was over there, Arabia, Syria, and everything else. We need to have a homeland for what? Turks. And that's what he established eventually in 1923. And he actually defended his country against some of the wild foreign forces. So his goal was to establish an independent country and everything. And the means of it was through, you can't come up with any kind of peaceful solution through what? Through instrument of war. He accomplished a lot. He accomplished by establishing actually a republic after what? So many centuries of having an empire. Okay, established a public education for everybody, not just for people who can. Public education, instrument of, like other social services, like in addition to education, hospitals, and a lot banking, a lot of things that nowadays we see it and we take it for granted. So those were some of his accomplishments. Plus, he establishing some political parties, elections, parliaments, this, that, a lot of these things that what Turkey really didn't have at that time. The main shortcoming of it was, bottom line, he was a military man, he was trying to accomplish a lot of stuff in a short period of time. He didn't have sometimes patience for, the type of bickering that happens in a kind of democracy, is that right? Because that's how democracy works. It doesn't go very fast, it goes very slowly, because you need to come up with some kind of compromise among different leaders. All right. Having said that one, now let's go to the next one, okay? Here we go. This is Muhammad Reza Shah of Iran. Muhammad Reza Shah of Iran, it was a son of Reza Shah of Iran. And Reza Shah of Iran was a contemporary of Kemal Ataturk. Guess what? They were, even though throughout history, Ottoman Empire and Persian Empire, they were rivals, okay? And when they both became modern, very much they were friends. In fact, for a period of time, Reza Shah wanted to establish a republic in Iran. And, the religious, groups, they wouldn't want it because they said, no, you have to say this and that, you can establish their own. So Reza Shah made a coup, against the dynasty which existed, just pretty much like what, Ataturk and his, allies, they did against the Ottoman, emperors and everything. And in case of Iran, it was the Reza Shah against the Qajar, dynasty, the last dynasty before the Pahlavis, they take over. And then he led the Iran, during World War II, which was a very, very difficult thing. He declared neutrality, but because he was dealing both with the Germans and the Italians, and then also with the British and everybody else, and the location of Iran. Look at the location of Iran. You see right here, Iran, Churchill called Iran to be a what? A bridge of victory, because the British were very much interested in southern part of Iran. In Abadan, the British have established the largest refinery in the world at the time. Is that right? So, and then look, Iran is basically connecting the Persian Gulf to what? Caspian Sea, and that was not Russia, that was what? Soviet Union. Well, Soviet Union was an ally of US and UK against Nazi Germany. Is that right? So what they did was the British, they waited until the German, engineers, they established a trans-Iranian, a railroad, okay? And then, they decided to invade Iran. So the Soviets, they came down from the north, and the British from what we call nowadays Iraq, and also from the south, captured Iran, and then got rid of the Reza Shah. And then they put his young son, Mohammad Reza Shah, who was 21 years old. Is that right? What's 21? It's just when you can drink legally. Is that right? They put him as a king of Iran. So Mohammad Reza Shah was sent by his father to what? to Europe. He was actually in Switzerland, and all of his education was there. So while Kemal Ataturk got local education, Mohammad Reza Shah got actually what? International education. So he spoke French beautifully, English beautifully, you see what I mean? So he was not like a typical type of person. What's family background? Well, his family, his father was basically, again, middle class, okay? And he was from a military background, just like what? Just like, Ataturk, all right? So the class was originally middle class, but when you become a king, you started owning a lot of stuff, is that right? Pretty much the belonging of the state becomes your belonging, so you became rich. Upbringing, as I mentioned, his father had 2-3 sons, well, one of them died, but and then two daughters and everything. So it was born and raised not in a very large family like in Saudi families. The Saudi family is very, very large. A lot of princes and princesses, okay? Not in this one, like 4 or 5 people, is that right? And then his profession, obviously, he studied a lot of things, but then he had to study military because all of the leaders are supposed to know something about the military, so they're theoretically defending their country. Is that right? The career continuing with that. His goal was when he saw that Iran, even though it declared neutrality, because Reza Shah was looking at Iran like, oh, I'm a Switzerland of Middle East. Well, there's a big difference, okay? Switzerland, the location of it, the leaders were able to somehow manage relationship between the Nazis and the Allies so they can stay an independent country. Here you are in Iran, okay? You're a developing country, you don't have the same abilities that Switzerland had, you see? So then there was a challenge right there. And then when the system changed, Mohammad Reza Shah was really affected by his father had to abdicate, is that right? Forced by foreign forces to leave the country. And he was very much afraid of the Soviets because he thought the Soviets, look, all these northern areas next to the Caspian Sea used to be a part of Persian Empire. What happens? The Tsarist Russians, they took over, all these areas, you see? All right now we call it, the Istans, is that right? Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, all those stuff. And all on the Caucasus area, Azerbaijan was a part of Iran. Parts of, Armenia was a part of Iran. Part of Georgia was a part of the Persian Empire. And the rest of it was a part of what? The rest of it was a part of basically the Ottomans. So as the Russians, they come south, they start taking those territories. So he was historically very much afraid of what? Of the Russian. Doesn't matter if they were Tsarist Russian or if they were Soviets, which actually had even an ideology, which was very scary to him. Okay? So, and also it was not like, he was in love with the British, is that right? But he thought maybe he can make a deal with the British that they had pretty much control over the Iranian oil, is that right? Located in the southwest of Iran, in this area. As I mentioned, they actually built the largest refinery in the city of Abadan. Abadan, is that right? They built over there. So he thought maybe he can use the fund and everything else comes from there to modernize his country, to bring it to the 20th century, okay? So that was a part of his goal. So there was tremendous amount of what? Tremendous amount of, infrastructure building with money from the what? The money from what? Coming from the oil. All right. So some people say that because he was from one side really undermining the middle class, who some of them they kind of have leftist ideas, he really underestimated, the religious figures or something. The religious figures were the one that eventually, Ayatollah Khomeini was the one that eventually led a revolution against him and what? Got rid of him. Is that right? So sometimes people, they say that. Sometimes people, they say, no, he moved Iran too fast, in a way that when you go to that, path of modernization, it was not just modernization, it was westernization. And if you remember, we talked about these concepts in earlier module, in module 1, that we said that westernization is a term you really do not want to use because it's value added. That means that not only you have to modernize and do economic development, but also you have to accept what? Western what? You have to accept Western values. And that obviously didn't fit very well with the religious what? Institutions in Iran. All right. So he accomplished a lot in terms of the economic development, but obviously not much in terms of political development. Yes, they did have a majlis. Majlis is a term used for parliament. But majlis, especially after he came back from, coup d'etat, which was, brought him back because in 1951 he left the country. He was forced to leave the country by the nationalistic, prime minister. When he came back, he tried to make sure that he controls everything very well. So not much of a political development, all right? And then his main shortcoming became that, because if the system was maybe a little bit politically developed, because Iranian people were going all over to get education, they're coming back to their country and say, oh my gosh, it's run like a, backward country, you see? Not even developing country, like a backward country. So they were frustrated, they became a member of these opposition. So as you know, eventually in 1979 revolution, they got rid of him. All right, let's talk about the last case study. If we can, okay, finally cooperated. And this is what Jamal Abdel Nasser, again, from a middle class, again, he got his education from public schools and then went to the military. You see right now the similarities, you see? There are some interesting similarities, okay? Class, as I mentioned, we talked about that. Upbringing, as we mentioned, just regular middle class upbringing, education was what was available. And again, military was what? So military in case of Ataturk and in case of what, General Nasser, were what? The main social institution helping him to what? Achieve his professional goals. So he was a professional soldier, okay? And then his career. His goal was, here we go, Egypt. He was trying to make sure Egypt that, his claim to fame is not oil. It has some, a couple of, oil wells, actually more than a couple. But it's not enough for a population like this, because the three countries we talked about are actually the most populous countries in the so-called Middle East. Turkey, Iran, and Egypt. They have the most population. Nowadays, each one of them, they have about 80 million, okay? A little bit more, a little bit less average. But what you need to know is Egypt had actually Suez Canal. That was their major source of what? National income. And Suez Canal was run by the Suez Company, which was, run basically by the British and the French. So he tried to nationalize it. He tried to do these things. Excuse me. He tried to make sure that his country is what? Has actually a way and an income to develop. So if this is what he was trying to do, then what went wrong? Well, he's facing some great powers. He's facing the British. And the British, they do not want to lose all the benefits they used to get from Egypt. Remember, the British were not easily giving up even India, which was what? Their main colony. Well, Egypt was another one, okay? At the same time, Nasser notices that, after World War II, the British allow that European Jews, and they immigrate to the area of Palestine, and here there is going to be an establishment of, from their perspective, a European colony, just like some of other regions in the world, how that started. So people like him, they started thinking about, oh, this would be like a beginning of like what established United States and Canada and Australia and New Zealand and parts of Africa and South Africa, that here comes these Europeans, and little by little they start taking over. You know what I mean? So, of course, it didn't, fit very well with his ideas. Of course, from the perspective of the Jews of Europe, they thought, well, we just need to have a homeland of our own, and where could we go? And that's why they end up in what? They end up going to, after the Balfour, the declaration and everything, established themselves in what, in the land that was called Palestine. Is that right? And then little by little put it together. Now, we're going to talk more about this one later on, but I just wanted to provide you with just the surface aspect to understand why, because I do not try to show one leader is good or one leader is bad. He is good or he's bad. He is doing this or is that. I want you as a political scientist to look at both positive and negative side of it, and whatever they do, it could lead into some interesting stuff. Is that right? So, his major accomplishment, one of his major accomplishments was establishing the Aswan Dam. Is that right? As you can see right there, the name right there, Osman Dam. He went to US and UK and he was asking for money, and then they thought, well, if you want us to give you money, you have to do these things. And he thought, wait a minute. We used to be kind of colony of the West. Now, by doing these things, I'm going to lose my economic independence, okay? So then he went to the Soviets for money. Okay, when he came to the West, he asked for weapons. They said, oh, you're going to do this and that, and we don't know what you're going to do over there. They didn't give it to him. Then he went to the Soviets. So it's not like he was a socialist. You know, I mean, I know that during the Cold War, if, as John Foster Dulles said, if you're not with us, you're against us, there was an attitude like that. He was not actually interested in that. He and a number of other leaders of developing countries, all right, like Nehru and Tito of Yugoslavia and Sukarno of Indonesia, they actually put together a group called Non-Aligned Movement. Is that right? And we can talk about that one more when we talk about foreign policy. So some of his accomplishment was trying to get his country to be as what? As developed as possible with very, very few sources of what? Income they had. The main source being Suez Canal. Now, why the dam was important? Because Nile every year floods. Okay? Well, traditionally when it floods, it enriches the land right there, and that's why, you know, the Egyptian civilization has come about. Is that right? Okay. Guess what? That can actually work against it too. Is that if the river is not really regulated, you know, it could kill people as well, wash off people to the sea and everything. So that's why Aswan Dam was very, very important, all right? And they had to actually move some of the historical buildings and, you know, statues and everything else they had just to build what? Just to build the dam, to control what? And there is a huge lake behind it. Those of you who are going to get a chance to go to the Middle East and Egypt, I know a lot of people, they just go to the pyramids, but oh my gosh, go to this area. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's amazing, all right? So he built that one to make sure that what? He can produce enough food for his what? Growing population, okay? And then at the same time, he wanted to defend his country. So these were most of his goals. Of course, he also underestimated certain things and overestimated some other thing. He underestimated, for example, the power of the new state of Israel, okay? Because Israel established itself, you know, in 1948, declared independence and everything. And then he thought, oh, okay, well, it's a small state. We are a much larger state. We know. I mean, looking at the size, he didn't really consider them very much. So when Israelis, they started moving and, you know, taking some territories here and there, he said, well, we can do this. He went and gave all these very, very fiery speeches. Is that right? Okay. Well, let me tell you something. In the Middle East, just like parts of Italy, I do not know if you have seen it or not, in Italy, in Rome, when the two taxis, they have an accident or something, people, they started acting like, oh, I'm going to hit you, I'm going to hit you, you're going to hit me, you're going to hit that. But people who are around, usually they come and they separate the drivers from one another. The drivers are not really interested in hitting each other, but they kind of need somebody to do it. So talk is loud, action is very what? Very low. Is that right? Not so loud. He underestimated, you know, Israelis, and he overestimated the size of his country and everything. He thought something is going to happen. Is that right? So in 1967, he gives all these speeches, all these things, and he moves his military here and there. They ask for those, you know, peacekeepers who were in between, you know, their territory and, you know, Israelis. Oh, leave this, that. You know, he was just trying to basically show off. Guess what? You don't joke around with Israel, you know. You mean business, they're going to think about it like you mean really something that don't think talk is cheap. Is that right? So Israelis in 1967, is that right? The 6-Day War, they took that threat very, very seriously. In 6 days, first of all, they bombarded all the, you know, air forces of, you know, Egypt, Syria, and Jordan and everything else to make sure that they don't have any air cover. Is that right? And very quickly, they defeated all, you know, 3 states, because Lebanon was not really much involved. Is that right? 3 states, very, very quickly, they took over, as you know, the area we call West Bank and Gaza, and they took over the whole, you see that Sinai, peninsula? They took over all this. Now, what was the result of that? The shortcoming was, even though he had all these wonderful ideas, he led to the biggest defeat of what? Egyptian, you know, republic after all those things he accomplished. So his shortcoming was that gap between his understanding of what's going on and what's the capability he has, you see. And then when he felt he's kind of like pushed away from the West, he started going a little bit more toward getting power from Soviet Union and reestablishing this whole notion of non-alignment, that, hey, we are not for the capitalist, first world or the socialist, second world. We are a part of the third world, and our foreign policy is supposed to be neutral. He actually resigned after the defeat, but the people, they loved him so much, they asked him to come back. He came back, but I think he was already so depressed that he died relatively soon right after that. So what can we say? Well, how can we conclude this discussion we had about the leadership? You can see from the description of each one of the leaders, first of all, the role that military played. Is that right? In training people, in acting like social mobility factor. Also, the fact that all three leaders, they had military background. All three of them, they were individuals who wanted to modernize their country. All three people, they were not really religious in that format. Is that right? But they had to deal with that religious segment. All three people, they tried to bring public education, a lot of services to their own to their own people. All three of them also at the same time, maybe they had good intention. I like to give the benefit of doubt to everybody, okay? Maybe they had good intention, but those good intention didn't necessarily, in practice, came out to be fruitful in terms of establishing true democracies. Now, interesting enough, years after Ataturk, right now, in the Middle East, among all the Muslim countries, Turkey is more or less democratic than any other ones. And Iran, even under Islamic Republic, has what? Has elections and everything, even though, there are institutions, we're going to talk about this one in future modules, so I'm not going to cover it right now, that has institution that they limit the number of the candidates and they go where the, eligibility of individuals or something. But still, these are the, relatively the more open one, because some of the rest, either there are kingdoms and it's very clear who is the leader, is that right? Or even if they consider themselves president, it's like father, son, is that right? Like the Assad regime, father, son, and then after that probably one of the sons of President Assad. Okay, that's as far as what I was trying to tell you and communicate with this. So think about it very carefully. And then if you have any questions, always do what? You always email me. Okay, I hope that you enjoy learning more about this one, because as you can imagine, this provides, it was written like mostly like history, but I needed to give it the political science dimension to it. Have fun rereading the material or reading the material more carefully. Bye.